Good afternoon, guys. Good afternoon. It's Saturday, 4:01 p.m. Welcome to the Law and You. I am your host, guys, attorney at law, Shellon, Washington, licensed in the state of New York and licensed in my hometown, Guyana, and in the Twin Island of Trinidad and Tobago. It's a pleasure to be here every Saturday, bringing to you this series. And I hope that each time I come here and I go through different topics, that you guys will share the live, invite your friends, your family, whoever, so that they can get this information and maybe they'll be able to share it with someone who needs this type of information. Now, usually I bring you topics of interest, things that I know which affects the general population in terms of the law. This afternoon, we will be discussing wasteful dissipation of marital assets. As you know, guys, once you file a divorce, if any of you initiate divorce proceedings in the state of New York and some other states, but I focus mostly on the state of New York, there's something called equitable distribution of marital assets. So once you file a divorce and you have assets, everyone know that those assets has to be divided. And how those assets get divided depends on numerous factors, including age and health of the other party, the ability to go and find work. Because, guys, I know a lot of people are aware that when you marry somebody, being conscious, you must be conscious that it's a financial contract you're entering into. And I've mentioned this numerous times in my other videos that when you marry someone, it's not just about a romantic relationship, but society and governance is structured a marriage in such a way that it's generally seen as a financial obligation. To the money spouse, it's a burden because the money spouse is always responsible for everything. To the non-money spouse, a marriage is seen as a security. So you guys need to get this and get it in your head. If you're marrying somebody who is not on the same level as you are, that person is seeing you as financial security. And it might not be evident in the beginning because most people tend to be blinded in the beginning of any relationship. So even if they're picking up a dead weight or somebody who will be seen down the road as a liability to them, it wouldn't be clear to them in the beginning because there's a veil and they tend to just see everything as love. But when it comes down to it, if that marriage fails, then you recognize that, hey, I was putting myself in a position to be financially obligated. So if you look at marriage the correct way as a financial obligation, because guys, think about this logically, why would you need to get legal documents if your marriage was just for love? If it's just for love, there's no need to go before a judge or a pastor and have a certificate, a marriage certificate saying that you're bound to this person as husband and wife. There's no need for that. The whole purpose or the entire scheme behind that is to make it into a financial institution. A family becomes a financial institution for the government, right? So now when you go and you marry that person who is, by the way, the dependent spouse, you have to look at it that sometimes down the road, if the marriage doesn't work, that person will become a liability to you. And the non-money spouse must look at it to say, well, if it doesn't work out, then I will be financially secured on this man or this woman. And a lot of times people get blinded. I've had so many calls from people and they tell me, I married this person. They didn't have anything. I worked and I did everything in the marriage. And now they're trying to do X or to do Y. It's your responsibility, ma'am or sir, to make sure that any person that you're going to marry, that person can take care of themselves financially. And if not, it's incumbent on you to ensure that you have either a prenup, a postnup, or a trust to protect yourself, your asset, in the event that relationship does not work out. I've said this several times in other videos before, that a lot of times people just look at a relationship as a means to an end. A lot of people who are not financially secure, don't have the means to become financially secure, look at the marriage as just a way to get over in life, for somebody to put them up in life, like provide for them, make provision. And a lot of times they are not in love with the person, but because they see the person as a financially secured person, they take that person, not necessarily for love. A lot of times it's just, okay, one client told me once, the wife told him he's just a meal ticket. He was just a meal ticket. So when you consider these factors, you want to look at everything cautiously, look at everyone cautiously, and don't just jump because, okay, I'm in love. Make sure you put your affairs in order before you think about the love part. Think about the love later. I've had a situation where one of my clients went through a bitter divorce, but we ensured that the assets were settled in a very good way, that he walked away with what he was comfortable with. And yet, even though he went through all that hardship where he was swearing, cursing, miserable with his life during the whole process, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, at the end of it, he went back into the same situation where he married another woman who was financially dependent. And you can't be bothered if this is people's choices, because if it happens down the road that he ends up in a divorce, he'll be in the same position where he has to support that spouse using for maintenance, and he's going to have to split the asset. That spouse is going to be entitled to whatever the assets are at the time of the marriage to the time the divorce is filed, and then he will be responsible, because she is a dependent spouse, to take care of that spouse. Now, we're talking about wasteful dissipation of marital assets today. So we're going to look at that and see what that means for you and what that means for your spouse. Now, like I said to you earlier, in a divorce, one of the things the courts try to do is try to divide the assets in a way where it compensates each spouse for whatever they put into the marriage. But don't get this twisted. There are some judges, which I have met in my career, who are very, I don't know, they're kind of one-sided. Either they hate men or they hate women. I've definitely met a male judge, who is still a judge, by the way, and it seems to me like he hates men because, I was representing a client who was cheated on. His wife she got pregnant during the marriage. It didn't work out. And some of the factors that goes into equitable distribution includes the contribution that a spouse made during the marriage. And it seems like a lot of the cases, you need to know, they're settled. A lot of cases are settled. They're not even going to trial. So because 98% of the cases are settled, a lot of the times, sometimes the judges don't tell you outright that they're forcing you to settle, but they give you no option, and you feel cornered that you have to settle. And if you don't settle, you have to always bear in mind that there's a human element making the decisions for your life. And if they have to sit there and hear your dirty laundry, hear your life story before them to make a decision after a trial, they probably will be so angry that they will write such a decision that will be so detrimental to you financially, you would think it would have been best for you to just settle. And I'm telling you this because I've already seen it. I've seen it in my career. I've seen a judgment which I myself was shocked when I read the contents of the judgment. I didn't know that a judge could be so brutal and one-sided to punish a spouse in such a way. This is why we need to discuss the whole issue of wasteful dissipation of marital assets. What is wasteful dissipation of marital assets? This happens where, let's say the parties work. Let's say that there's one money spouse and then there's the dependent spouse. I like to refer to the spouse who has no money as the dependent spouse. So let's say the money spouse works hard. He gets a lot of money. He does most of what the family requires. He pays the mortgage. He pays for vacations for the family. He takes care of the children. then the family together, because let's say the dependent spouse, she is a homemaker, she takes care of the home, takes care of the children, she cooks, she provides support, emotional and support to the husband whenever he comes home. She massages his feet, she has his dinner laid out on the table, she does his laundry, she does his manicure, his pedicure, you name it. Let's say that's the scenario we're looking at. And the husband, on the other hand, he's happy with what he's getting at home. But let's say he decides that he's going to go out and be unfaithful to his wife while she's home doing all of this. He goes out, he sees a nice, pretty younger woman, he gets involved with her, and he decides that he's going to go on multiple trips every year. He buys a trip, they go to Cancun, they go to Ghana, they go to Costa Rica, they travel the world while his wife sits at home and takes care of the children. He is gone 3-4 times a year on various trips. He goes jet skiing, he goes sailing, he does, snorkeling, scuba diving, you name it. Let's say this is the type of life he spends and buy expensive jewelry for the other woman that he's seeing outside of his marriage. And all this, guys, he's putting it on his credit card, he's putting it on his bank account, so that anybody who reviews his financial documents will see that it's glaring that this man is using marital assets for expenses that has nothing to do with his marriage. So, guys, marital expenses would be anything you spend money on that involves your marriage. And a lot of people are they're naive. They don't even know that in a divorce proceedings, all of your bank statements are made public. Well, not public, but it's made available for your spouse's attorney to see. So if you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, and you're taking all these trips, you're spending thousands of dollars on the other woman, but guess what happens? When the divorce is filed and we get to the discovery portion of it, everyone is going to see all the trips you took and you put on that credit card, all the money you spent on that other woman. And then if you were paying her rent or her mortgage, that's also going to be evident and visible if you're doing it on your account. Even if you're taking cash out of the account, it's going to be visible and evident that you're doing something that you should not be doing with the cash from the family's assets. And that, my friend, is considered wasteful dissipation, because you're taking family assets and you're spending it on another woman, you're spending it on expensive trips, you're spending it on things that has nothing to do with your marriage. Even for argument's sake, let's say that he's taking the card and he's buying trips, a ticket for himself to go meet the woman in another country. That's also considered wasteful dissipation, because the spending pattern is going to be noticeable on your credit card or your bank statement for any judge or any attorney who's reviewing those records, your financial records, to notice that you've been spending marital assets on things that has nothing to do with your wife, your children, your household expenses, or anything related to your family. So let's recap the wasteful dissipation. The wasteful dissipation of marital assets is you spending assets that belongs to your family on anything that has nothing to do with your family or your household expenses. So when you go to court now under divorce, let's say the attorney goes through the discovery part. Every legal proceedings in the state of New York has a part that is considered discovery. We do discovery. The discovery is where you seek out evidence to support your claims. So me reviewing the files of my client, what I'm going to be looking at every bank statement is to see if there's patterns unrelated to the marriage. So I have staff who look through, they comb through your bank statements very, very finely and look at all your expenses, the way you've been spending over a period of time. If we see that you're spending on the mortgage, we see that you're buying foods for the house, we see that you're paying expenses related to the household, we know that's considered marital expense. But when you get down to it and we see hotel, you're getting hotel very frequently. And I tell you, a lot of men are very naive, because this mostly happens with men. You see, a lot of women are clever. Women do stuff, because I've definitely seen cases where women are engaged in stuff, but the women are mostly clever. See, some women use cash. They use non-traceable money. But men are very, very naive. They will take the money from their joint account, take the money from their account, take the money from their savings or, assets. A lot of people have taken money out from their 401k. They've taken money out from borrow against their pension to do what? To spend that money on the other woman. A lot of people have bought properties for the other woman. A lot of people have done so many things with marital assets. And then when it comes to the divorce, it's glaring that they have wasted marital assets, which is called wasteful dissipation of marital assets. And if you've done that, my friend, when it comes to your divorce, the judge is going to look at your spending, look to see what was done for the family, and whatever is considered, if it's substantial. Because let's say you're spending every year, and this happens a lot too. Let's say every year you're spending about $10,000 every month on your family, on your household expenses. You spend $10,000 on your household expenses, and then there's another 15,000 that you're spending on the other woman, on trips you're going with the other woman every month, on paying her mortgage, on taking care of her children, on doing all these stuff. The judge is going to look at that and consider it wasteful dissipation of marital assets. And this is why, my friend, a lot of men end up retired and broke, because they take all their assets and they spend it on the other woman to the expense of their own family, to the expense of their own wife and children, which I think is very crazy, because women generally do not spend money on men. A woman will take that money and she will save it for her children and for her household and her family. But a man is constantly spending money on the other woman to impress the woman, to keep her, to do whatever it takes. And he is wasting the family assets. And then when it gets to the judge, what the judge is going to look at is the amount he was spending on the other things that has nothing to do with his marriage, and he's going to weigh it in proportion to what was being spent at home. And based on that, a judge can make a decision that one spouse was responsible for wasteful dissipation of marital assets. And if it is found that you have wasted marital assets, when it comes to the division of whatever is left, the judge is going to weigh it heavily against you. And once that is weighed against you, chances are the wife or the non-money spouse is going to walk away with more than 50% of the household assets. She's likely to walk away with 60, 70%. It just depends on all of the factors. So it wouldn't even matter at that point that you, my friend, was putting most of the money into the marriage, that you were investing most. You were the one working while she stayed home and be a homemaker. It wouldn't matter at that point, because what you've done, you've wasted family resources. You've wasted assets. So all that money that could have been available to be split between you and your spouse, who are now divorcing because she figured out you were cheating, or vice versa. It could be that the man figured out that the woman was cheating. So now she finds out and the man figured out that the woman is cheating and he wants a divorce. And now the asset has to be split. But because one party was engaging in wasteful dissipation of marital assets, the equities are not going to be equal, my friend. It will not be equal. It is only equal when you learn that you cannot waste marital assets on somebody who's outside of your home. If you want to spend that asset, it doesn't matter what you purchase in your home. The court is not going to consider it wasteful dissipation, because I know there's some family, maybe they don't like to cook. Maybe one spouse likes to cook, the other doesn't. And the one who doesn't like to cook is constantly buying food from the restaurant, taking the children to restaurant and doing things like that. And that is not wasteful dissipation, because that money is being used on household expenses. Or it could be that one spouse just like to shower the other spouse with expensive gifts, clothes, buy gifts and clothes for the children. That's not wasteful dissipation either. The factor of wasteful dissipation only comes into play when you're taking assets. And when I say taking assets, a lot of people are misguided, because a lot of times people tend to feel wasting marital asset comes from, if they're like they're taking their own money and they're doing something in terms of themselves. They're buying things for themselves. If you buy something for yourself, if you spend money on yourself, again, it's not going to be held at that much against you, because ultimately, if you buy fancy jewelry for yourself, it's marital assets. And a lot of people tend to think, okay, marital asset, if I'm working for my money, that's my money. That has nothing to do with the relationship. No, any money that you've worked for during the marriage is considered marital asset. You understand? So if you earn a pension during the marriage, marital assets. If you earn a 401k, let's say you got married in 2017 and you had the 401k since 2005, the marital portion will start from the date of the marriage, which is 2017, and it will end at the time when either party files a divorce, seeking they file an action for divorce. That's the termination date of the marital portion of anything. It terminates from the time one party or the other files for a divorce. The clock stops there. The clock starts ticking from the date of marriage, and it terminates at the date somebody goes to the court and they file a complaint for a divorce. That's when it stops. So until that time, anything you're working for, don't even have the conversation to say it's my money or my this or my that. No, the only time you could even say that is if it's a sham marriage. And we know very well that there are a lot of sham marriage that were never entered into for love. A lot of people got blindsided because people went and offered and married them just for the purpose of getting a green card. And once that green card came through, that person was out the door. I know some of you would have seen this multiple times on the 90-Day Fiancé show, where a lot of people got duped into, they entered into relationships, they married somebody, and then it turned out that, hey, that marriage didn't even last because the person their real intention was just to enter into that marriage for the purposes of getting that green card. Other than the sham marriages, guys, every single penny you work for during a marriage is considered marital asset. Investment, part of your social security also, if you've been married for a certain amount of years, goes to your spouse. The measuring standard is 10 years. You got to be married to the person for at least 10 years, and then portion of your social security will automatically go to that spouse in the event of something happening to you. So you got to bear in mind that every single asset, except for assets that were pre-acquired. I've done other videos on what pre-acquired assets is, or non-marital asset. And non-marital assets is simply anything that you purchase or you acquired prior to marrying your spouse. And then after you marry your spouse, you left those assets as separate assets. You never invested marital funds into those assets, or there's nowhere to trace that marital assets was invested into those, whatever those assets are. So for instance, if you purchase a house before you marry and you have tenants in the house and the tenants are paying the mortgage for you, let's say the mortgage is $2,000, you get $3,000 in rent, that property will probably stay as separate property forever, because you have the tenants paying for your mortgage, and you do not have to take anything out of the money that you earn on the W-2 wages or even a business or whatever to put into that asset. So that asset will remain or maintain its separateness. And even if you did put, let's say you put marital assets into it, you only put it for a very short time. Let's say 1 month, one of the tenants vacated the property and you had to take your money from your W-2 income to pay the mortgage or make up, let's say $500 short in the mortgage for 1 month. That 1 month or that short period of using marital assets in that property still wouldn't make it a marital assets, because there's not a significant amount of contribution coming from your marital asset to keep that asset afloat. So keep that in mind. To maintain, if the asset is separate, then it's not considered for all purposes. It's never going to be considered as the asset, a marital asset. Okay, so the wasteful dissipation would not be applicable to your pre-acquired property. So for instance, like I said, if you were renting for $3,000 and the mortgage was $2,000, you take the extra $1,000 and you spend it outside on the other woman, you're safe. The court can't consider that as wasteful dissipation of marital asset, because that's your pre-acquired property. You acquired that property before you got into the marriage, before you got into the relationship, and you haven't contributed anything from your marital asset to that. So that money, you can keep that money separate and do whatever you want. But any money that you earn, anything that you acquire, even if you did an investment, let's say you invested in stocks or bonds, and then the stock skyrocketed and you sold it. Let's say you purchased it for 10,000 and it skyrocketed and you sold it for $1 million, right? The $1 million is, if you didn't purchase it during the marriage, that $1 million is not marital. But if you purchase it during the marriage, you purchase it, $10,000, let's say 2 weeks after you married your wife, you purchased this stock, and it went up to, in 5-10 years, it went up to $1 million. That $1 million marital asset. It has to be used for the marriage. So then you can't say, oh, it's my money, I invested into this, I purchased this stock, so therefore she's not entitled. No, the court is going to make you, sir or ma'am, pay your spouse whatever they're entitled to on that asset. So remember, wasteful dissipation only accounts for marital assets, and the court will have access to all of your financial records that you have been dealing with during the marriage. So you got to be careful not to waste marital assets, because when it comes to dividing those assets, the court's going to look at how much you've spent, who you spent it with, and if it was spent in the wrong places, then the equities will not be equal, or it would be, because you would have spent most of yours, and what is left, the court will award most of that to the other spouse who did not wastefully dissipate marital assets. Guys, thank you again for joining me today, Saturday, November 16th, for this edition of The Law and You. I encourage you to share this page, share this information, click the like button so that people who need to hear this content will hear it, and it may save somebody from a long time of stress. Because I can't stress enough to you how many people I've seen gone to court and they've lost significant amount of assets that they have acquired just because they didn't do the right thing, or just because they didn't consider these things that I tell you about prior to their divorce or prior to marrying the wrong person. As you know, guys, marriage don't always last. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, because as humans are very fickle-minded and they're very versatile. They're not static, they're dynamic. And because of these factors, you must always take into consideration what is best to protect your interests. Because guys, you don't want to work until you're age 50, get into a divorce, lose most of what you work for, and then have to figure out how you're going to retire. You want to secure your assets so that you can retire and be happy and live a successful life without being a burden or financially dependent on your children during your retirement age. Thank you again, guys, for joining me. And I hope I'll see you again next Saturday for The Law and You. Once again, guys, thank you. And if you're in need of any legal advice, legal consultation, the number is on the screen. 718-877-3100. Our office is located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. Give me a call if you're in need of legal advice. Thank you, guys, and I'll see you again on next Saturday on The Law and You.